so mad. Close your eyes and just stay tight. We have to go. Stay with me while we leave. Don't worry, just believe me. This journey will relieve us. Stay with me while we leave. Stay with me. It wouldn't be right to say always for place where we live with certain place. For fire makes the city look so mad. Close your eyes and just stay tight. We have to go. Stay with me while we leave. Don't worry, just believe me. This journey will relieve us. Stay with me while we leave. Stay with me. It wouldn't be right to say always for place where we live with certain place. Wouldn't Close your eyes and just stay tight. We have to go. Stay with me while we leave. Don't worry, just believe me. This journey will relieve us. Stay with me while we leave. Stay with me. It wouldn't be right to say anyways, for the place where we live with certain blaze. Fire makes my city look so bright. Close your eyes and just stay tight.